Hello and welcome. Today, I'm joined by Natalie Lynch, who is the founder of Treaty Oak Employers Law Group, a specialized practice focusing on workplace investigations and employment law. Natalie has built a reputation for helping businesses navigate the complexities of employer-employee relationships while maintaining a strictly intentional approach for her own firm's growth. In this episode, we'll dive into her one investigation at a time rule and why Natalie believes most law firm marketing is junk because owners haven't done the math on their own lives first. Natalie, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you. Would you mind sharing the story of how you started your career in law in the first place?
How I started my career in law. I think I was very, very bored. I don't think I know. I was very, very bored at the job that I had after undergraduate. I was working in a purchasing department, which is actually an experience that served me very well, but uh, it wasn't going to go anywhere in that. And I wanted something that was intellectually challenging because I was just so bored every day. And the in law school seemed to fit that bill. And I probably had a pretty big change the world, social justice, I can fix all this attitude back then in my 20s. So it seemed intellectually challenging and like a good thing that could make the world a better place.
When we spoke before recording, you said that you had a very clear vision for what you wanted to do during those years early in your life. What were the things that were important to you in the early stages of your life that now you basically get to do through the practice of your firm?
I do help people. Not every people that I engage with thinks it's helpful, but I'm definitely enlightening the truth a lot of times when I'm doing investigations. So I'm certainly not holding everybody accountable, right? So an investigation is this weird thing where I'm sometimes the police, the jury, the judge, the prosecutor, the defense. I sit in all those roles. I don't get to tell people how to handle the outcomes that I come to, but I'm definitely a person who is uncovering truth, putting together disparate information. One silo of information knows this, one silo knows that, and calibrating perspectives. Because even aside from different groups knowing different things, different people are having different experiences. So I certainly get to do all that. My early career, back when I sort of slid into purchasing, I'd wanted to do international data infrastructure work. I was going to travel the world and make databases talk to each other, and none of that happened. I got laid off from Deloitte and Touche. The whole department got laid off before I ever started my job. I was in Ghana. And I hadn't even started, and I got laid off. But to answer your question, I still bring information systems together just in a very, very different way.
In a very different way. Did you have any mentors that formed how you think about it that you were looking up in the early stages of your career?
No, I think the answer is largely no. I think I had negative mentors more than I had positive mentors. And I think that's a real shame. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I think I've always had a little jealousy for people who have parents that are better mentors or first bosses that are better mentors. My brother had a great mentor. His first boss was the neighbor down the road. And they stayed in, I think they're still in touch. I later in life came to model groups of people or things I learned. But one thing I will say about that is I don't think early in my career I had many good mentors. I had good negative mentors, people that I saw making decisions who had outcomes that I didn't want to be like, and I would make different decisions.
I think that's a very interesting point, and that's just as important because a lot of young attorneys early in their career, they're looking to repeat certain people that they perceive as successful, but
Yeah.
just as knowing what you're going towards is just as important to know what you don't want.
Well,
So
and I
I
think
think
we're
that
going to
could be a
talk
very valuable
about that.
lesson.
What do you want?
Sorry?
I was just going to say, I think we're about to talk about that whole knowing what you want and what you don't want.
Yes, exactly. Do you want to go in that direction?
We can. You want to tee us up with a question?
Sure. Maybe just before we get into that, from the early of the career, just to set the scene for your origin story. How did your own practice get started?
Anybody who owns a practice will immediately recognize this as ridiculous. But my practice started because I came to be a very sick person. So I have an autoimmune disease and I got very, very sick. The doctors were telling me to go wrap up my affairs, get my papers in order, think about my legacy for my new child. What did I want to be leaving behind? And I decided that wasn't good enough for me and got really ornery about it. But along the way, I had a job. I had fallen because of the way things happened. I was working in purchasing again. So I'd been a lawyer and then I moved back to the state of Texas and I couldn't practice until I took the bar again. And so I was not working as a lawyer. And then I took the bar again and was about to start looking for another job. But I also was going to like 1 or 2 doctor's appointments every day, just trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And I had this idea that if I started my own firm, I wouldn't get fired for absenteeism. And again, any business owner is going to recognize this as ridiculous because nobody works more hours or nobody works harder than the owner. But at the time, it made sense to me. And so I left that job with a group that actually a lot of the people that also left that workplace hired me to be their attorney and they hired me to be their attorney. So it was again, there's not much I've done that I can regret in its entirety. Maybe I would have done it earlier, different, whatever, but it ended up being a wonderful place to hover for a while. But I quit that job and started my own law firm precisely because I wanted to work less, which is, again, just not at all how that really happens.
Were you very intentional about setting up some boundaries in a way how you took on work and then you structured your day so that you could have a growing business at the same time respecting that freedom that you wanted to create?
No, that's not something I learned how to do till later. I mean, I think I probably had some boundaries. It was appropriate for me at the time, but at the time I had a very strong family first focus. I had a 2-year-old. I had a 2-year-old and not a very functional work or family life, rather. I had a very dysfunctional family life. I had a bit of a family first attitude. And I suppose at the very, very beginning, we were in a house where the office was in my bedroom. And so I had some big boundaries around I don't want to look at my computer when I'm not sitting at it. And that maybe that is part of what spurred me to recognize that that was a functional boundary that I could do. I mean, I'll share. I'm in a converted building in my house that I cannot hear the dishwasher and I cannot hear the doorbell. And if I couldn't be working here. When I'm here, I'm at work. So no, in the beginning, I had horrible boundaries and I did personal at work and work at personal. That is not a part of my story that's particularly successful, so I cannot recommend it.
Well, probably going through that experience helped you formulate how you went about the work in the futures.
Absolutely.
That was that was a learning period. I think for maybe some of the other attorneys that also want to build some barriers, and even though as a business owner, it's very difficult to do in the beginning, but they want to go to that. One of the fears could be that clients won't respect it, or they might lose client relationships if there are any boundaries being set up. Did you find that to be the case, or were the people that you were working with very understanding?
I think that there are all kinds of clients, just like there are all kinds of people. And so I'm jumping to the end because, of course, I took whatever money came through the door in the beginning. So I'm jumping to the end when I say it's been several years since I stopped accepting every client that came through the door. And I'll tell a quick anecdote. I had a client that had figured out what time I left the office to pick my child up from kindergarten. And he would call because he knew that I would have to sit in the line to pick my child up and that I would be in my car for 30 minutes. And that a lot of times the transition from school pickup to school care, I would forget to bill him. And I had a client that would call me at that time every time he needed help or sort of needed help. And I took a lot of clues from what my clients were watching about the way I behaved from him. They are watching you. They do watch your schedule. The other thing I'll say is we have a workplace or a workforce that entered the workforce lately that is so hyper focused on work-life balance. I think we've overswung a lot of times, but somewhere in the middle is everybody's sweet spot. I mean, if you want to be an attorney that only works with jerks who have no work-life balance and only work, that's fine. You can do that if you want. I choose not to. I adore my employees and I will not subject anyone to an abusive client. I just won't. There's not a single person on my staff that I would subject to an abusive client. What I have also done, because sometimes our clients can't control that they're in an emergency, I have an emergency billing rate. There is a rate at which I will bill my clients to drop my family for a minute. And of course, I get to say no. But if
Mhm.
you need something with ridiculous urgency that is inconvenient and means I have to go get a pet sitter and a childcare and I have to get all of my next meals delivered because I have to jump into your project, I am going to bill you at a significantly higher rate for all of those real and personal consequences that you are putting on my lap that wouldn't otherwise exist. Um, and so I think that's very normal in Asian law firm culture. At
Mhm.
least I've been told, but it's not very traditional in the United States. And I don't deploy it very often. For one thing, it's 4 times my normal rate. It's a lot of money. But when clients choose to drop something in my lap that is not something I could have controlled and I am willing, or I have a staff member who is willing, we'll do that work, but it looks different. And of course, I give my staff a bonus from the extra money that I'm
Mhm.
making, or, as the owner, if I'm the one doing the work, I get that extra money. But it turns out I sell my time for service for fees, and there's a price at which I'll do that in an emergency situation too. So I guess a couple things. I have this emergency billing rate, and I also have and it's not called this internally, but a no jerks policy. And I have fired clients for violating that rule. It's in our like welcome to our firm. If you treat people disrespectfully, we will fire you. I announce it at the very beginning of the relationship, and I have ended relationships, and I've told people before they become a client that I don't think that they are respectful enough of
Mhm.
the people, in the story they're telling me about what they need help with, that they have not exhibited humanity, and I don't think we'll get along. So I'm pretty, my staff will come to me and say, I think we need to use our no jerks policy. Would you mind if we fired this client? And I know I do it. I don't let them do it. But I think that those couple of policies have helped me balance who and how I work hard for other people.
I think those are great ideas as well for other lawyers to hear. For the no jerks policy, is it usually the signs of that you see early in a relationship, or usually most of the clients that historically you fired later, they were acting differently in the beginning of the relationship and then they changed? Or were there signs that you could have spotted early in the conversation?
I think I have two answers. I think most of the time I should have known. Probably, I think I would say most of the time that we get into a situation where we genuinely don't like our clients, we have been slow that week in sales, or I'm really behind in calling people back, and I am trying to hit some goals and I'm trying to get some numbers, and I took somebody that I really should have known different. The other bucket that most often falls into is somebody is so good at masking
Hmm.
who they are and the things they've done that we don't learn until later that they did do the naughty thing. So, um, I work for employers, I work for companies. And so we'll get a manager or an owner who will say something like, this person is accusing me of doing all these really bad things. And we'll take them on and get, into collecting documents and learning information. And it will occur to us that I think that person's right. I think our client was mean and awful, but they're just really good at selling themselves as a good
Hmm.
person. And there's all kinds of colloquial diagnosis, like that's a narcissist, that's somebody who masks. And, sure, it's all of that. They sold me on what a good employer they were. And it wasn't till later that we realized maybe they're not such a great person.
Hmm.
Um, Bad people deserve to be represented and have an attorney too. I prefer that our clients all be good people.
I think that's a very fair sentiment that will resonate. I want to quickly jump back to the second advice that you shared about the billing rates specifically for the emergencies. I
Hmm.
really like it because I know a lot of lawyers that don't change their commercial terms when working, and they get stressed when there's more work coming, but they actually have that lever to pull. They could introduce something like the
Yeah.
different fee rates for an emergency. How did you first implement that? What gave you that idea, that gave you the confidence to actually have that as an option?
What gave me the confidence? I mean, I first got the idea from reading a Japanese legal contract, and had it
Hmm.
in there, and I thought it was brilliant. What gave me the confidence was that I never thought I'd use it.
Hmm.
And then by the time something was rolling around that I wanted to use it and implement it, I didn't want the work, but I did want the money. And that is the lever that it gave me. And so the first time I used it, I guess I got a lot more comfortable with it. But it's just sort of, it's mathing, right? Like it's not entirely fiscal mathing, but if I'm going to work all night, I am going to be dysregulated for a couple of days until I get my sleep cycle back. There is an actual consequence for that. I'm not going to be billing my other clients. I'm not going to be responsive to them. I'm not going to be nice. I am going to have a physical consequence in my body.
Hmm.
Somebody who isn't me could figure out what that's worth. It's real. It's a cause and effect thing. But what gave me the confidence to do it, I don't think I meant to use it in the beginning. I think it was bluffing until the first time I used it. And over time, I have come to learn that my clients are as empowered as I am to make decisions to use me or another attorney to pay my rate or another rate, to pay my emergency rate, or to change their deadline.
Hmm.
They are, and nothing says they can't ask me to adjust it, but nothing says I can't say no. It's all just a transaction. This is just a transaction. Our relationship is transactional. And again, I hope I love my clients, but at the end of the day, I'm not so special. You can't replace me. And there are other attorneys that are cheaper. I'm better. But they can do that. I mean, they can go find somebody else. Or I could say, you know what? I actually adore you and you didn't do this to yourself. And it turns out my roommate can take care of the dog for the week, so this actually could work. Let's go.
Hmm.
There's nothing that says I can't be reasonable within my own rules. And I've had my staff has come and said they need this by tomorrow. I'm going to have to work overnight. I don't want to pay them, or I don't want to charge them the emergency rate. You usually give us a little extra money. Are you willing to not, like, can we do this anyway? And my staff knows they can come to me with those sorts of things. I'm not Ebenezer Scrooge. I can make those decisions, but it gave me options.
Hmm.
So I did it. But I also raise my
It's
rates every year routinely. I make myself do that every single year because you have these firms that never raise their rates and don't want to have the conversations with clients. And then they're like, oh, I haven't raised my rates in 8 years. And I don't know if anybody's noticed, but inflation is nuts right now. And it
hmm.
is expensive to run a law firm. But when I say I do it every year, it became a thing. And my clients know I do it every year. But the truth of the matter is, the first time I did it, nobody complained. Nobody complained. And so I think when we start to, as business owners and as law firms, sort of over functioning and thinking about how other people should devalue us, we do the entire industry and our families a real disservice.
I think that's a great point, and a lot of firm owners forget that they have the agency over their rates, and if they are the ones that haven't changed it in years, they shouldn't pass the resentment to their clients. It's
Right.
something completely within their control. Which brings me to another point that we discussed that I'd love to go deeper on is your rule about one investigation at a time.
Mhm.
If you mind explaining what that rule is and how you've structured that.
So I am the owner of a law firm, and I got to be the owner of a law firm by doing good work in workplace investigations, which in the United States is the Civil Rights Act. It's Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And it says if there's sexual harassment in the workplace, or sorry, any harassment in the workplace, you need to investigate it. And I love that work. That is the work that kept me from never quitting being a lawyer. I really like it. And it is the part of the work that I am very good at. But the other thing I really like is building a company. And it's in alignment with my personal life goals and my career goals is organizational ownership. And the way that I balance that and sort of stay in the game is that I'm a owner of a law firm most of the time, most of my days. I'm building out. Right now, we're redoing our billing system. I just got off the phone with my CFO. Later, I have to talk up to my marketing lady about why one of our vendors isn't doing what we all thought they were doing. There's a lot of systems management and people management to regulate, but I do still love investigations and it keeps me in the game. And so I try to build a practice that allows me to have one investigation at a time. And part of what that is something else that we've recognized is in our firm is that some practice areas and some tasks just don't have cohesive rhythms. And I don't know how else to say that, but I know that there are other phenomenons in nature where rhythms don't work together.
Mm-hmm.
The rhythm of an earthquake is not like the rhythm of a building standing. Like those two things just don't go together. And one of the things I know is that the rhythm of a workplace investigation and the rhythm of analyzing my financial books don't go together. I cannot have a day where I am hyper focused on analysis and comparing systems and comparing numbers and then flip over to somebody's drama and emotional focus of this just happened to me. Why did this happen to me? Why does nobody believe me? Why don't the documents show what they're saying? How come this person won't schedule an interview with me? When am I getting this report done? The cadence and rhythm of an investigation don't go with business ownership, but there's other stuff like that. It's the same reason I don't want a litigator doing investigations because they can't sit down and write a report. Those two activities just don't often jive very well. And I do know there are people that do that. So, like kudos to those people. But there are just other practice functions that don't go together. And there's a lot of ways you can balance that. You can say on Tuesday, Thursday, I do analytical work. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do drama. Or I do consults in the morning and I do focus billing work in the afternoon. I mean, there's ways you can break that up. But as an owner, the way that I have, it just keeps working is that I never do more than one investigation at a time because on my plate, I can't handle it. My investigators better do more than one at a time. But on my plate as the owner, I can't take a full load. I know the supposed goal of having made it as a law firm owner is that you're not in production anymore, but I like it and it brings me joy and it brings me happiness. So I don't care about that rule. I see it, I know it, I understand why it's a rule. But for me, I've adjusted the rules to let me do the one investigation at a time.
Some of the people that you've just mentioned, the CFO, the marketing person you have, I'm guessing figuring out what you want to actually spend your time doing, whether it is managing people or doing those investigations. At what point in the early days of the firm you started realizing that you need to create those roles and have somebody help you with that specific function so that the one investigation at a time could be your focus without being distracted for the larger portion of the time for the management activities?
I never worked for Big Law. So I went to school at night. I was working. I couldn't do an internship because I had a job and I owned a house and a car and I was already married. And so I had a pretty non-traditional start. And I never worked for Big Law. And so something that has been a huge benefit and also a curse is that I don't know how you're supposed to run a law firm. But I did work for a bunch of different companies. I worked in the purchasing department that worked with legal on the contracts that we wrote and worked with accounting on how much money we were allowed to spend when we bought things. And I saw the sales team doing, I saw all those functions and not every company did it great and I didn't get to study everything. But when I look at attorneys that went straight from undergrad through law school to wanting to run a firm, a lot of them just don't have that business knowledge at all. And there's ways you can overcome it. There's great coaching programs out there. And you can go buy your MBA, in coaching and get it hyper specific to your industry or to the legal industry in particular. So some of the systems I I intuitively knew. In some of the systems, I had to have a coach say, this is what you're supposed to do. And it went both ways. As a sort of landed example, when I had my first month where I had legitimate billing that I had to send out, and I had to collect this money, and then we got a little ways down the way, and I had to do my taxes, and all of this sort of stereotypical lawyers can't do numbers thing came roaring back, and I realized I was transposing numbers. I had been a little bit sloppy. The idea that I had more money to spend or less money to spend on a particular month wasn't occurring to me. The first thing I did was get a bookkeeper. That was my
Mhm.
very first outsourced job. I recognized that I was horrible at that. And I couldn't afford a CFO, and I couldn't afford a tax attorney to help me, or a tax consultant. I couldn't afford any of that, but oh my God, if I had a bookkeeper, I could use any of those other things to get me where I needed to go because my books would be right.
Mhm.
And I think just acknowledging what we're bad at can sometimes, I can't be good at everything. I'm never going to be the most intuitive attorney, CFO person, but I'm really good at hiring people. And so I use that skill to overcome my deficits. And I think I give my CFO a run for his money today. But it took me a while to get there because it's not intuitive to me. And I had to tell him things like, remember when I hired you and it was because I don't know how to do numbers? I need you to turn these numbers into pretty bar charts because I'm going to be able to take that and see things that you can't see because I
Mhm.
know the systems behind them up until the point where you make them look like things that I can't interpret anymore. To answer your question, I think it was a little bit that I had seen prior examples and a little bit of acknowledging my own personal deficits.
I think that's also a very interesting take that a lot of things in business you can intuit some of that. Some things are counterintuitive, but through experimentation, you can figure it out. It's actually probably more harm, to your point. Somebody coming from a big law, starting the young practice and trying
Mm-hmm.
to replicate things just because we always done it that way, without understanding why bigger law firm operates the way it is. That might not translate to the smaller practice. So I think having being open-minded to help and getting the right people to help with any gaps in knowledge or in a workflow is a really smart thing to do. Going back to your point about hiring people, with the experiences you have right now, if you are to advise a managing partner, maybe of a young firm, what would be the one piece of hiring advice that you would pass on to somebody else?
I have this working theory that we do hiring backwards,
Hmm.
totally, completely opposite of how it should be done. And I think this is about to get to another point that you wanted to do. Because you're right, you see these attorneys that came out of big law first and they don't know how to use the copy machine, and it never occurs to them that they can. You can't have a law firm without a paralegal. And I'm here to tell you, I'm 13 years into this, and we've never had. I'd be surprised if my any of my paralegals have used our copier because it's just easier to do it yourself.
Hmm.
Um, I can't handle that sort of lack of scrappiness, but I think in general, not just law firms, but most organizations hire exactly backwards. I think you have to start by saying, what's the point of this company? Which is probably not to work 80 hours a week. That's probably not the point of your company. The point of your company is probably because what you really, really actually want is a house in Cancun or a yacht or whatever it is, or, a vacation with your extended family in Australia before you're 50. Whatever it is that you want, you're not going to work every day because it's just so much fun. There are people like that. Not many of them are in law. But there's probably something you want, and you probably think or have a good estimate that the job you have today is going to get you there. Although it does seem like a lot of people don't math out that math in between.
Hmm.
But what do you want? How do you think you're going to get there? So, what are the goals for the company? Do I need to make 1 million this year and 5 million in 3 years? What is it that's going to get me to my personal goal? And whatever that goal is, what are the 10 things that you need the company to do this year to accomplish that? And what does that translate into people? And what does that translate into job duties? And what does that translate into skills? And so when we talk as lawyers about hiring a paralegal or a person with a certain set of skills, I need a lawyer who can do this, or a paralegal who can make copies. What do the copies have to do with the family vacation that you're trying to get? Because there's a long way between here and there, but if one is not feeding the other, there's just actually no point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I I know because I do this work. This is the work that comes through my door. People come to us and they're like, we need to hire a new sales manager, and we want somebody who's been in the industry for 100 years, and we want them to sell this much a month, and we don't want to have to train them, and this, that, and the other. That's fine, and I can help you do that, and I can add improvements to that whole process along the way. But what I can't tell you is if your systems are going to accommodate that person, because your systems are built on something you have either intentionally or non-intentionally determined feed what you really want in life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think we do it all entirely backwards. And it's really not that hard, except for that wee little part where you have to decide what you want to be when you grow up and what that looks like. But after you do it, you know it. And it might change. Maybe you don't want to go to Australia anymore. Now you want to take the family to New Zealand, and that's fine. But if you don't know how to reverse engineer what you want, it makes it really awful to go to work every day, and you're never going to hire appropriately along the way. And that's super simplified. I get it, but it's also true.
Very true. Why do you think it's so difficult for many professionals to have that look inside and figure out what they actually want, not what they're supposed to want, or maybe, what their peers are saying that they want, but what's actually authentically resonated with their motivation to do what they do?
If I could answer that question in the entirety, I would go down as one of the world's great scholars. I mean, isn't that the question for the ages? I mean, I think pieces of the answer to that are the problems of the ages, right? We're keeping up with the Joneses, or
Mm-hmm.
our parents didn't teach us to do that, or nobody told me that the only quiet time that I could have in my life wasn't just on vacation. I should have quiet time every day. And nobody told me that it was okay to want things. I mean, especially as women, we're not always told that we're allowed to want things. And so when somebody told me not just that I was allowed to want something, but also that I did it through a program. The program I was in was carving out time and space and homework related to me being able to articulate what I wanted. That first time is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as hard every check-in. I do it once a year now. Kind of, is this map still where I want to go? But nobody tells us to or teaches us to, and it kind of goes back to those mentors. A lot of those mentors, those negative in particular for me, the negative mentors I had, I mean, they never stopped and asked what they wanted. They just were doing something to feed their ego, doing something because their spouse told them they needed to go do X, Y, and Z for the kids. Fires. If you're in the middle of a big litigation and you legit do not have time to make some copies, you go hire someone to stop the bleed. You go hire somebody who's going to take your paper and scan it, because that's what you need in this moment. And I understand that, and that is always going to happen. But at a bigger scale, how did you get in this position in the first place? How did you take in a client that you didn't have the staffing resources to accommodate? And how many steps along the way could you have identified that you were going to need someone to scan things, that you missed the opportunity to front load those
Mm-hmm.
resources for yourself?
I think another piece that's also super important that you mentioned in your answer is that it's also okay to change that answer with the time. So probably everybody would be further along in making themselves happy and achieving their goals if they took the first step in what maybe version one of that looks like. And then they either see, yes, the signals are that we are on the right track and we are building the firm that we want and we're working with the clients that we want, or no, something doesn't resonate. And then they have a new information, and based on that information, they can change the direction. It's also perfectly fine. One of the angles to that, I suppose, is the marketing. And you mentioned that for many firms, they have a junk marketing because they haven't done that work. They get those maybe jerk clients that they don't want to work with, or they get the type of cases that actually not that interesting. What would you say if somebody watches this episode and they decide to have that moment of introspection? What would you say are the steps of, thinking like, okay, let's look at our firm, let's make sure that for the next, whether it's the next quarter, the next year, we are setting ourselves for success to identify what the plan should be, who we should be working with. How would you approach that exercise?
I do approach that exercise every year when I set my annual budget and my annual plan, my business plan for the year. Because one of the things I do is I have a fiscal metric, and I have to look at how do the combination of cases that I can take on meet that metric, given the people that I have and the skill sets that I have, right? I can take on
Mhm.
1,000 investigations, but if I only have litigators, I can't accomplish that, right? So I go into it knowing the ideal picture of how many investigations and entity formations and litigation cases and handbooks that I want to take on into my company this year. And of course, it never comes out exactly the way I want it. And we make adjustments throughout the year. But I do have a goal in the beginning. So I know where I'm going. I know that I need
Mhm.
this combination of cases. And I know today who my ideal client is. And I know that there's some variation in that. The person that consumes my handbooks is not the same client who consumes my investigations. The people who consume my handbooks could be 3 employees. The people that consume my investigations are often 3,000 employees.
Mhm.
But there are some common denominators in the way that I know that is that I've built out a firm wide ideal client, and I've built out practice area ideal clients. And I also don't think we can have this conversation in this year without saying something about AI. In part because it's amazing, and in part because I am lazy and I use it for a lot of this stuff. But I've gone through an ideal client profile, which you can ask AI to give you, and say, I need to know the demographics and the psychographics of my ideal client. Either ask me who it is, or based on all the intake notes of all my cases, or all my intake notes for all my cases that turned into investigations work, not litigation, but investigations work, tell me the demographics and psychographics of that ideal client. Where do they hang out on Sunday nights? How do they search for things? Do they always use referrals, or do they occasionally do their own homework? Which AI do they like? Which search browser do they like? Are they on LinkedIn or Facebook? And a lot of it ends up, everybody I know that has done this, they end up being surprised by at least a couple of things. And it's not that they don't have the data, right? You're feeding the analysis the data. You have the data, but you've never had the opportunity to just stop and think about it this way. We were working under the assumption that the very, very vast majority of the people that made the hiring decision to hire my firm were female. And
Mhm.
maybe it's because I'm myopic because we're a female-led organization. Maybe it's because stereotypically there's so many females in HR. But for whatever reason, we had continuously been operating under the idea, and I had said it to 100 people, that most of the people that made the hiring decision to hire our firm were female, and that was wrong. When we actually looked at the numbers, it was dead wrong. It's also a much less educated group of people, and it is a much younger group of people than I had in my head. And I didn't know that until I started doing the analysis in a structured way. But then the thing that you can do when you have that, and particularly if you're using AI to do that, is you have this project and you're like, hey, remember that ideal client profile you helped me build out for my investigative clients? I need to ask you some questions about that. I hired a new marketing company and they want to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm not sure I think it's a good idea because of this, that, and the other. What are my blind spots? How do I think about this? Tell me, let's work to the end of it. And sometimes I'm the idiot and sometimes the vendor's the idiot. And at the end of the day, I hope I'm always measuring the activities we do to my expectations. So I also expect to get between 7 and 10 times my spend on any of my marketing activities. And because if I'm not meeting that metric, none of this clever AI fun stuff matters. And I think that's another thing attorneys don't do. They're like, oh, being creative is fun. Having graphics on Facebook ads is fun. And it is. And it's shiny and it's so much more interesting and less serious than being a lawyer. But if it's not getting me the return on investment that I expect, it was actually just fun and not for work. But I can take a vendor who has the humaning skills of a human and the knowledge that AI called me out on my own blind spots and the data that I just don't cognitively have the capacity to have gotten through 13 years of client intake data, and tell me that my client shops for books at Barnes and Nobles and not at Amazon. I don't know that. But now I know it. And so maybe I want my ads to run alongside Barnes and Nobles because that's going to be helpful. And I didn't know it before.
So many great insights that you just shared. So thank you, Natalie. I think for me, one of the highlights that I want to resonate with more of our audience as well is the fact that a lot of those insights, they do not have to be invented. It's not that you're starting with a blank piece of paper. Is that you have those intake forms, you have the history of client relationships, and so many firms are sitting on the treasure trove of that data points. And now with the AI, if they use it, they actually get the answers. And then that becomes actionable information that they can focus on the most profitable cases, the clients they enjoy working with, and they can attract them in a meaningful way, as opposed to just guessing and jumping from one thing to the other.
Yeah.
Because as a marketing partner to a lot of firms, I 100% agree with what you said. Sometimes people that making the decision about the marketing, they are making personal decisions based on their personal preferences that might not resonate with what their actual buyers and their clients want to see. And if those things are not aligned, the output will not be what they are hoping to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, said differently, my clients don't hire me because I'm like them. They already have one of them. They need somebody who brings them a different set of skills and a different perspective. And so if I'm advertising in the way that I consume advertising, I'm only going to attract people just like me. And people just like me aren't hiring me. They're already employment attorneys.
Right.
And I don't know what I don't know, right? So I don't know how to be somebody else, but there's marketing people that can teach us that. So if I come and say, here's the treasure trove of data about my client, where do these people consume things? How do they consume things? I don't know. I've never been those people, but I know a lot of them. It still takes a human expert to have ideas about how to put it all together with the analytics and robot data we can get today.
Certainly. One other thing that was interesting that you shared is your expected return on advertising activity that has to be within the range to be profitable. I think another part of that that's probably worth talking about is the time from the marketing activity until you actually have a client that becomes a client and actually pays. There are often a false expectation when it comes to whether it's digital advertising or number of other activities that it's going to happen almost instantaneously. And because of the short view, sometimes great marketing initiatives getting killed way too quickly, or the opposite happens and something that's wasteful just carries on for a long period of time because it sort of looks interesting to the managing partners. What's your position on how long should it take between an initiative and actually work coming through that?
I think I have two comments on that. First of all, I have no idea. I am not the marketing expert. And if you're coming to me and asking me how long it should take for a marketing effort to work, we already have problems. So I'm going to fall back on, I know I'm good at hiring people and I am going to trust but verify all of the
Mm-hmm.
experts that I have. And so if you tell me I want to do this campaign and it is going to take 3 months, I am probably going to do a little bit of my own research to see that that seems normal and normal in my industry and normal for that activity. But I am going to trust you. And then in 3 months and 1 day, I am going to acknowledge that I now need to hold you accountable because I did not abdicate my authority to you. I just trusted you to be the expert. The other thing that I will say is that I think in my own firm, I don't think I know, in my own firm, it doesn't matter what my marketing department does if my sales department isn't exceedingly reactive. People
Mhm.
call law firms in a crisis, and if I don't match their energy, they go somewhere else. And I do B2B work. So I am not doing divorce or personal injury. And I will still tell you that if you are not immediately reactive and really rather skilled at what happens when the marketing company makes your phone ring, I can make it look like it was marketing's fault, but it was still my fault because I didn't take the ball when the phone rang with high reactivity and high level of sales skill to receive the marketing. And part of that is weeding out the bad ones quickly so that I can
Mhm.
tell marketing that they are sending me junk, and being able to calculate it. But at least in my own firm, and I think I know with some of my friends that sometimes as a firm we have not taken the leads well, and we have blamed the marketing vendor even when it wasn't their fault. But I think the more straightforward answer to your question is you better be the expert telling me, and I better be the person holding you accountable to what you sold.
I think that's a very reasonable point. And the handover between a call coming through and how it's actually received by the law firm can absolutely make or break any marketing campaign and have a huge impact on the law firm. And it's important to have that the discussion early on because it's not necessarily about, assigning the blame. It's how do we make sure this works so there are happy clients, so the firm is getting work, and then the system can be improved over time.
Yeah.
Natalie, when it comes, you have a marketing person, you work with different marketing vendors. With the experience and with everything that you had to figure out as well, building your practice, what's your criteria for judging if somebody is a marketing expert, if you should give a new strategy a shot? What's your maybe mental checklist of the things that you're looking for in somebody that you can trust to execute and to help you grow?
I think that we need to, I think lawyers in particular, but probably a lot of owners do not appreciate that in much the same way I am not an expert in every kind of law. Don't give me a personal injury case. I'm going to do it wrong. I can't expect every person with a marketing word in their title to know how to do everything I need. And I'll use this word again, if I abdicate what I need to one person who happens to need the money, joke's on me. I don't think I will ever again have all my eggs in one basket. And that doesn't mean don't hire an agency. And I know there's all kinds of perspective on whether or not you should hire marketing agencies. Marketing agencies often have a lot of really talented people in them, but you're not going to get just one person because not everybody can be good at all the things. And look, if you're a personal injury firm and all you need is Facebook ads, you just hire the Facebook ad person. But most companies probably don't just need one thing. And we've grown into a place where we have a marketing director, and that director manages a handful of vendors who have hyper specific skill sets.
Hmm.
Excuse me. I have a guy that is a real techie nerd and does a lot of back end stuff on our website and building out, making different pages talk to each other and do things. I have a person that is really good with the graphics. I have a person that's really good with social campaigns. I have a person that manages me when I go and do presentations, and they all know each other and talk to each other. But I would never be like, hey, she's on vacation. Can you do it? Because it's an entirely different skill set. And so I think over assuming any other industry is as oversimplified. It doesn't do that industry justice. And as a consumer of that industry, you're not doing yourself any justice and any good. Marketing expertise is as varied as legal expertise. And so I think you've got to know who and how you're consuming things, which kind of goes back to that point of if you just went from school to big law to owning a business, you skipped the whole learning how complicated it is to run a business.
That's right.
And you can go learn that again. There's all kinds of ways. You can go get an MBA, you can, get some mentors, you can get some coaching, whatever. But if you skip that running a business is an entirely additional set of skills and then assume your marketing vendor is going to fix all your problems, you're just asking to be disappointed.
A very sobering position and much needed for the law firms that usually refer to either a partner that has a marketing function part-time and then they're
Right.
passing on something to the quote unquote marketing person that is expected exactly like you described to be an expert in all those very different things, and that's just not the way to do it in 2026. Natalie, you mentioned setting up goals every year. For the rest of 2026, what is the North Star for you? What's the one biggest objectives that you've set for yourself?
The last 2 years, we've really focused on fiscal goals. I have a really cool team right now. And so in the past, we focused on hiring. Recently, we've focused on hiring. But I have a really cool team right now. And this year, we are really focused on income generation, which is partially a marketing activity.
Mm-hmm.
But we are looking at that combination of being efficient in production, highly productive in marketing, really, really honed in on sales, and then delivering such a good project that we don't have to look to sales or marketing because our customers come back to us. There is nothing cheaper than selling to an existing client. I mean,
100%.
Kudos to those firms that don't have marketing because they have so many repeat customers. I cannot wait to be one of them. We'll get there. In the meantime, I get marketing.
I think there is also a question of probably timeline because many senior lawyers they give that advice is that do good work and get referrals. And it's good to say that from the perspective of 40-year career in the same field in the same city. But whenever there is a younger firm, you need to build that client base. You need to learn and build that, and that takes marketing. And eventually, to your point, you don't need marketing because you have a loyal customer base, and that achieves the goal that you've set for yourself.
Well, but even still, I mean, you kind of still do new marketing. I'm realizing I almost wish I could suck that back because I still have to sell to my existing clients to remind them that we did good work. In the same way that if you want to have a healthy marriage, you have to keep reminding your spouse that you have a healthy relationship, that you're working on, and that you're a good person who's growing and doing better and did good in the past and will do good in the future. It's still a relationship. And so, I mean, I'm making the joke. It is still like 90% cheaper to sell to an existing client than a new client, but you do have to sell them. You do still have to invest in that relationship. And there's again, I was being a little black and white. I mean, you should still include marketing in how you connect with those clients that you already know are almost a sure thing. Mm-hmm. They're the most valuable ever. And the marketing efforts on that with them are smaller, but they're not gone. You can't just assume somebody's going to always remember you 3 years down the road when they have a new problem. There's a whole psychology about reminding people at the end of a project to remember you again when they have a new issue. And marketing's a big piece of that.
Certainly. In the advertising world, there is the famous anecdote of a big corporation preparing a new marketing campaign in their offices, and the chief marketing officer is basically walking by the room where they preparing the campaign. Few months, he goes by the room and he sees the mock-up of different campaigns and sketches, and eventually he goes to the person in charge of the project and he says, "Isn't it time that we change the campaign? I've been seeing it for many months." The person says, like, "We actually haven't started that campaign. Our consumers are not thinking about it. It's us thinking about it all the time. Our consumers have other things, and this is something that we have been just thinking about internally." So To your point, clients are busy, they're doing their things, they have emergencies or non-emergencies. So that has to be
Yeah.
part of the activity as well. Natalie, for somebody that wants to learn more about your work, about the work of your firm, where can they learn more online?
treatyoaklegal.com or Natalie Lynch on any of the social platforms, I guess especially LinkedIn. But treatyoaklegal.com, or I guess ask your favorite AI lately.
Perfect. Natalie, thank you so much for coming today. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thank you.